Now we get to the questions that are about both of the passages. And in a way, these are kind of just like the main idea whole passage questions that we see normally in the passages, but now they're at the end and they're taking into account two separate passages. But just like with the whole passage main idea questions, the same strategy is going to help us here, which is to make a dumb summary. Right? Don't overthink this. Try to keep it as simple as possible and use that to kind of at least get a first pass through the choices and see what doesn't match with what you remember. And we don't need to reread the passages here. If we've done all the other questions and jumped around to answer those and looked at those line references, we should be good. We should know enough about what they're saying that we can at least get a dumb version of what's going on. Oop. And so here's a case where I know that they disagree. First of all, that's kind of just the vibe of the passages, but if we go to the blurb here, these passages are adapted from the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Passage 1 is from a statement by Stephen Douglas. Passage 2 is from a statement by Abraham Lincoln. Douglas and Lincoln engage in a series of debates while competing for a U.S. Senate seat in 1958. There's a lot of clues here that they're probably not on the same side. They're against each other. They're debating. So, yeah, they disagree. That seems pretty obvious to me. And what do they disagree about? They disagree about something with slavery. I'm not going to get too specific right now. Again, keep it dumb. Let's see how that helps. So let's look at the choices. Douglas proposes changes to federal policies on slavery, but Lincoln argues that such changes would enjoy no popular support. Well, I remember Douglas talking generally about slavery, but changes to federal policy, if I remember correctly, it was the opposite. He's saying that things have worked out pretty well so far. There is no need for a change, right? We had other questions about that, about the fact that we've already existed as free and slave states. Why do we need to change it? Why do we need to worry about a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? Like, look at how powerful and amazing America is. We did it all with slavery. No need for a change. That was Douglas's point of view. That's enough for me to just cross this out, right? Like, I would need to be, in order to pick this, I would need to be able to specify the federal policy that Douglas wants changed. So if I was leaning towards this choice, I better go back to that passage and skim and try to find the specific policy. If I cannot find it, I cannot pick this answer choice. Let's do the same thing with B. Douglas expresses concerns about the economic impact of abolition, but Lincoln dismisses those concerns as irrelevant. Well, again, we saw this for another question. This is not about abolition. Lincoln is not arguing for abolition. They're not talking about it. What's happening here is that they're talking about broader policies about slavery, not about getting rid of slavery entirely. And so we would say this is too strong. This is maybe relying too much on our own knowledge of American history and not on the lines that are given to us here. We need to stick to what is said. So that is wrong. C. Douglas criticizes Lincoln for finding fault with the Constitution, and Lincoln argues that this criticism misrepresents his position. So they're arguing with each other, but specifically, do they talk about the Constitution? And yeah, I kind of remember that coming up, and there's another question, again, talking about the Founding Fathers and the framers of the Constitution. So it's not like I need to remember the specific line in the passage where they said this. The other questions, and this is true for pretty much every question that's about the main ideas, the other questions that are more specific are also about the main ideas. They ask us about things that are repeated, that are important for the passage. So that's why we do those other questions first, to get a sense, what are the main ideas? What seems to come up a lot? And it shouldn't surprise us when those same ideas appear in the main idea question. And that's what's happening here. I'm going to go to D for a second, though, first. Douglas offers an interpretation of federal law that conflicts with Lincoln's, and Lincoln implies that Douglas's interpretation is poorly reasoned. Well, interpretation of federal law. What's the law? Right? So again, we need to specify the thing that they're saying. So if he's offering an interpretation of federal law, I should be able to point to certain spots in the passage and show what that law is, what his interpretation is. Whereas with C, I can talk about the Constitution, right? Let's go to the beginning of the passage. Mr. Lincoln likens that bond of the federal Constitution joining free and slave states together to a house divided against itself, and says that it is contrary to the law of God and cannot stand. Yeah, there you go, Constitution. Lincoln says this. Douglas criticizes Lincoln for finding fault with the Constitution. There you go. But let's look at Lincoln. What does Lincoln say? In complaining of what I said in my speech at Springfield, in which he says I accepted my nomination for the senatorship, he again quotes that portion in which I said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Let me say a word in regard to that matter, and he's going to clarify what he meant. So, yeah, Douglas criticizes Lincoln for finding fault with the Constitution. I'm able to point to a spot in the passage that does that, and Lincoln argues that this criticism misrepresents his position. Yeah, I'll be able to point to the beginning and say, look, Lincoln is correcting the record here. So I get this through some dumb summaries that I've come up with, some clues left by the other questions, but the key is I'm not getting into the nuance until I absolutely have to. I don't even think I needed to go back and look for the lines for choice C. I was pretty confident that was right regardless, but for the sake of thoroughness, if I've got the time, might as well take it. But notice, I'm not rereading the passages entirely. You shouldn't be doing that for these whole passage questions. Trust yourself. You understood enough the first time you went through it. The first time you answered the other questions. You understood enough that you should be able to know the main idea. And trust that, save yourself the time, and try to answer the questions based on dumb summaries, not on some book report that you write in your head about what you've read. Stick to the dumb stuff and you'll be fine.